We finally have some news, and yesterday Ascension released the first part of the teasers and the changes coming along with Chapter 2. If you're not aware, Chapter 2 has been for the last leagues or seasons, has been the midway through Classic, where the devs does a major overhaul of current season, and often this new chapter will in some way or another shake up the meta. So if you haven't seen the changes already, I've linked them down below so you can read them after the video. Maybe you're wondering, well, what builds will be buffed because of these changes, and in what way or in what certain way should you react based on these changes. What is changed? So beforehand you had talents that are school based. So school based means that this certain talent is frost and spells abilities based, so it will only affect frost. But now with this change, it will now affect all crit chance for all spells and abilities. So the change they're making is that they're making quite a few talents generic. That means that they're affecting basically everything, every abilities, physical and whatnot. And also for this case of the talent, also the extra effect. So yeah, this is a big change. This is for crit and this is for damage, and they also did the same for haste. They did this for quite a few talents, and you can find them all below. I've just highlighted one of those more impactful ones, or the bigger changed ones, and basically it's only the ones that are above 3%. Winter's Chill is one of them, as you saw earlier. That is, for some builds, 8% crit. That is the best crit talent I think we even have in the game besides legendaries. Some of the biggest buffs are Sharpened Claws, and you can see before after here. Beforehand it only said melee crit chance. Sharpened Claws, it's not relevant for that many builds, but it is for the best cat build, the Wrath build, because when you are in cat form you are incentivized to cast Wrath. Alacrity, it's beforehand it was only spell haste, now it's also melee and range. 6%, it's still not a lot. There are quite a few better like haste talents, but well, now if you hit it early on in your build, well, you will still get some melee haste. Probably the biggest one I'm gonna mention, Nature's Grace. It will now also affect ranged and melee haste, and well, maybe you already guessed it, but there's a kind of combination when you're casting Wrath in cat form with the Nature's Grace. One of the issues that currently are with Season 9 is that the value for scrolls is so low, so because there are so few talents that you can actually hit for your build, you are just rolling and rolling, and whatever you hit 9 out of 10 times, it doesn't benefit your build. But with this change, there are going to be so many more talents like stepping stones that you can be picking up until you hit the best in slot talents for your build. So it will mean that from you start rolling and getting generic crit and generic damage talent, that progress will be faster. So this all in all just means that we have less useless rolls, because more of these rolls will benefit your build in some way compared to before. And one thing they didn't hit is that it didn't solve the totally useless rolls, and I hope they address these later, or just simply do a hotfix and remove stuff like Troll Sweat and Slow Fall. They are quite funny, probably for newer players, but seeing talents again and again that does not 0 for your build, but just 0 for any build at all, that is quite a bad feeling. So let's get into the juice. What does it mean for bad specs? These are specs that are just heavily not played, or underwhelming, or just misses another legendary or something to be on top with other specs right now. Maybe they're piloted bad, maybe they're not solved, and we didn't figure out what other legendary we should pair them with. Quite a few other things wrong with some of them. Looking at you, Knight of the Eclipse, you are spread across so many different talents compared to other legendaries that are so much more impactful. But stating what we have right now, for Knight of the Eclipse, if you really want to go for it and you have the cards and roll the build, you will generally see like increase in the build for getting 3% increased damage, because 3% damage will now both hit the Starfire and the Wrath and some of the Sinister Strike damage, and overall it's not gonna be that impactful, but all in all it's gonna increase the build. Same goes for Hot Hands. It's more the crit I'm gonna focus on with the Hot Hands, because 3% crit will mean when you start rolling for Hot Hands, you will really want to be crit capped in order to not miss your procs, and the 3% crit chances will help you with that. So for the Evoker build is that you combine Firebolt, Frostbolt, and Arcane Missiles to weave every mage spell together. The issue this build had beforehand is that there wasn't that many talents or support for casting 3 different schools of spells like Fire, Arcane, Frost, and that meant the builds were so spread across what specific talent they could use and just buff these certain abilities, and didn't make the build that good. For the one with the light, I'm going to say I haven't played much Paladin, but for Paladin, when you look at the talent, how many things increase holy damage and how many things buff holy stuff in general, we just don't have that many talents. And that also means that when you card for Paladin and the early game is that you're going to have a blast, you're going to have everything for Paladin build, but later on when you really have to min-max and get the last couple of talents, the talents are just not there. And for Elemental Lord, same goes here. Elemental Blast, and however you build it, most likely with some Shaman Shocks, you're using, again, Nature, Fire, and Frost. And there are talents that buff all of these damage types, but they are far and apart. So when we now have so many different talents that can just buff the build with 3% increased damage, the build is going to be helped a bit. It's a slight buff, but it's a step in the right direction. What does these changes mean for good specs? And when I talk about changes, I mostly talk about the 3% increased damage. This picture were posted in the Discord yesterday or 2 days ago. It was from the progression on a stream or somewhere that one of the better guilds are doing, progressing, something like that. It's hard to take too much from this. I think it was from Chromagus, but it's not important. Just to give a few like key builds that are up there and to have something to talk about and how it affects different builds. So for the Wild Imps build and Fury Warrior, Wild Imps are, from what I'm aware, shouldn't be affected by the 3% increased damage for the build, unless there's a tech I'm not aware of. Most likely there are. For the Warrior build, from what I've tested and seen, right now there's not much space for even like 3% increased physical damage talent, so there are probably not space for any generic 3% damage talent, so that build shouldn't get much increase from this. And then we have these 4 builds. There are 100% a lot of other builds that are getting buffed and a lot of top end builds from other guilds that are getting buffed. This is what I have access to talk about right now, or to just specs that we know that are strong and will most likely get buffed. So the first one we're going to talk about is Shaman. I've just called it Primordial Fury Shaman. You can call it whatever. It's mainly a Frost, Nature, Fire hybrid Shaman. How are Shaman getting benefit from these changes? This Shaman build is Frost based, so a lot of these talent are either just 3% magic damage or 3% specific Fire or Frost or something like that. With the changes coming now, this Shaman build can now increase all of their damage, even for their weapons, with increase all damage done. Very specific, getting very nice benefits from enhanced weapon mastery, because they also get the Storm Strike and Lavalash crit and the Shaman weapon enhancements crit. But since the Shaman is trying to get talents for both Fire, Nature, and Frost, now they can pick up all of these 3% increased damage and buffing a wide arrangement of all of that damage, and because of this they're getting a nice buff from this. Then we have something I've also played and I'm playing it right now. The very core breakdown is a cat build that uses Serpent Form, Poisons, and Wrath, and you're using a talent so you can cast Wrath doing your cat form. It's a slight buff, but just simply buffing Sharpened Claws and gaining 6% crit for your Wrath, it will help you proc certain things, and just overall Wrath is a lot of your damage, so just buffing that is a very nice buff. And maybe an oversight, I don't know, but 20% attack speed from one talent, because you are casting Wrath doing cat form. That is a lot of attack speed when you're poison cat form build, so it's gonna be a very nice buff to poison cats as well. And the last spec I'm gonna mention is this. I've called it a rogue build, you can call it whatever. Dark Intent, Phalanx Strike, benefiting from Double Down, Sinister Strike, Dark Intent, and that is the gist of the build. He uses Phalanx Strike to buff the shit out of Sinister Strike, and right now his damage breakpoint is mostly shadow damage from, he also uses Fel Infused Weapon, So the core of this build is shadow damage with Fel Infused Weapon, but now he has the possibility to pick up all of these 3% increased damage nodes, and that will also buff the Sinister Strike damage that are physical, and Eclipse Strike that is normally not getting that buff from the shadow damage, and a bit of Overheated Strike damage as well. And I don't know how much his damage the poison does, but just being able to increase generic damage like this on a build like this that are spreading its damage between Shadow, Arcane, and Nature is just going to pump up the build a lot. That was all of the good builds, and now some niche interactions. These are just for the memes. I just thought it was funny to mention. So Wild Rev, you're spamming Rev, Locust Shot, stuff like that, to Chimera Shot and Serpent Sting, gist of the build. But now, and Locust Shots should, from what I'm aware, scale of your weapon attack speed. So by now being able to either card or roll Nature's Grace, a nice little thing is that you're getting 20% more range attack speed. It's an upgrade, but it's not very good spec right now in current state of the game, but thought it was funny to mention. And the last build, Beastmaster Hunter, still overwhelming. There are so many increases to pets and pet talents that it just increases the pet, and all of these changes, none of them will affect this, so hopefully we see some more changes for this when the major part of the rework and chapter 2 is coming out. So 2-part conclusion. Now just be aware when you roll that, especially when you roll a new build, that a lot of new talents are going to be very good stepping stones to just get 3% increased generic damage, and it's going to raise the floor of how good a build is when you draft it, roll it, get it out of the box, and just keep out. And a lot of old players is also now going to look for talents and going to ask the question, well, is this a good talent? And going to check twice before rolling it away. This was just the tip of the iceberg of what good builds are out there. And also, let me know in the comments if I missed anything. I cannot sadly know every build and interaction and what is going on in some of the other top guilds, and that is just how it's going to be. But that is the lovely part of community, internet, and we being able to share in the comments. And the last thing I want you to take from this is that the question, should you now go out and roll like a crazy for your build or prestige because now this new build is going to be insanely crazy? My suggestion would be don't, because in 8-10 days we are going to have like an overhaul of, as we saw in the spoilers, new crazy talents and stuff like that. So I think we still should just sit back, relax. If you haven't already, watch my guide to 5 ways you can hopefully safely prepare for chapter 2, because you probably already have the feeling of, well, now my main build will need these 3 new talents, and should you go out and get these 3 new talents, it will probably be, there's a very good chance this could be a waste of time if you are anyway gonna roll like a crazy mad lad in 10 days for all of the new stuff from chapter 2. So do what you can now to prepare. Prestige level would be my main suggestion. Get the legendary cards you don't have, grind for seal cards, stuff like that. Just farm marks, everything that you can safely invest in. But again, if you need a good build, of course, for progression and stuff like that, of course you should invest in your build and the time for something fun to play and something fun to progress, because that is the name of the game. I mean, playing the game and having fun with rolling a build. So of course, but with that, thanks a lot for watching. I will hopefully see you again before I'm going away for a week on Friday and not gonna be home for the chapter 2 announcement, but when I get back I will make a video update for my thoughts and my opinion about it. And if I have the time, I will do a community post on my YouTube. So if you don't want to miss that when the chapter 2 changes are coming up, subscribe to get notified on YouTube when the community post is posted. So again, thanks a lot for watching. See you in the next one.